If you're here, it means you need some help with organization. So sit back, relax, and I'll review what I went over in class to help you organize your next speech. Organization is the process where you are structuring your main points and subpoints into a format that makes sense to your audience. It's messy, so keep that in mind, and also remember the best writing is rewriting. There are two outlines that you will use. One is a formal outline that looks like this, and the other one is a keyword outline that you use for your speaking notes. And some people put this on note cards, but most of my students just take their formal outline and edit it down into a keyword outline, or they jot notes down like this one. Research has shown that we only remember 3 to 4 bits of complex information. And think about it, the 3 bears, the 3 little pigs, the 3 musketeers, the 3 stooges. So like these examples, organize your speech into 3 main points, and it's up to you to figure out what those 3 main points need to be. But you start throwing more in there, the audience is not going to remember them. Go ahead and get your purpose out that has your objectives, your general purpose, your thesis, and your key. And pay attention and note what your key word is. Step 1 of organization is to look at that keyword. And what you've got to do is make sure that keyword appears in your main points. So here's an example for my movie or my speech about the movies that the Beatles are famous for. So if you look at these 3 main points, you will see the word movie in each main point. And not only that, you probably notice all of these main points look alike. And that's referred to parallel structure. It seems weird, but don't worry, you don't actually say your main points in your speech. I'm going to give you a workaround for that. But this parallel structure forces you to have an audience-centered speech that's easy to follow. So you got to trust me on this. So why don't you go ahead and take a moment and jot down your main points and see if you can format them into something that looks similar to this example. So now we're going to get into the second step, which is editing and revising, and this is where things get messy. The first thing you need to do is take all of that support material, which includes things that you've researched and things you already know, and start putting them into each main point. And again, it doesn't need to be neat, just jot ideas anywhere on your piece of paper. And take a minute to look at these. Do you have a cupcake? Or is it a bran muffin? Too many facts? Or is there not a lot of substance and it's all frosting? So it might be time to go back to the drawing board if you see problems. The main thing is take care of things while they come up instead of waiting to the end when you're really stressed out. The other thing you can do at this particular stage is actually practice your speech. So go through each one of these and just talk through it kind of casually and time yourself. The main thing that you want to look for is that you're spending an equal or about an equal amount of time on each main point. So if you find that as you put your speech together, like in my example, my first main point is 30 seconds, my second main point is 1 minute and 30 seconds, and my third main point is 3 minutes and 30 seconds. I have a lopsided speech, so I have some decisions that I need to make. And so what I might do is I could go back and add more to the first 2 main points or maybe just the first main point, and then go back and cut stuff out of the third main point. But really, it might be a good idea just to give my speech on the third main point and only talk about the movie Yellow Submarine. And if I decide to do this, I would rewrite my purpose and then rewrite and reorganize that third main point and turn it into my entire speech. While I'm in this editing and revising stage 2, it's really good to kind of reorganize things. I might need to reorganize my main points. And the beauty of an outline is that's just really simple. I draw arrows, do things like that. And then I'm going to finalize my ideas. So I'll end up with an outline that looks like this example in front of you. And again, I'll practice it. So I will talk through kind of casually. I'll talk through each main point. for a 4 to 6 minute speech, you want to aim for approximately 1 minute and 30 seconds for each main point. And I'm going to be honest with you, that is not a lot of time to talk. So you might have to take material out. Do not think, I'll just talk faster or I will just talk slower. Because I'm telling you, in the history of speech giving in my class, that has never worked. Edit, edit, cut, cut. That's the best way to do it. Now we're moving on to the final step of organizing your speech. And this is where you format it. And this is also the stage where you neaten everything up and put it into pretty much final draft. So when you go to rehearse it, you're just making minor revisions. At this stage, you might rephrase your main points because they don't make much sense, or you have thought more about it and there's a better way to phrase it. And if you haven't done so, this is where you will make your main points into complete sentences, which is what you turn into me. And lastly, in this formatting stage is where you add transitions. And transitions are a way to help the audience follow your speech. And a transition is placed between the main points, so between main point 1 and 2 and 3. There are 3 parts to a transition. You need to mention the previous point, you mention the next point, and then you want to put the keyword in there. So you'll see the example. So A Hard Day's Night launched their movie career, but the movie Help is another movie that the Beatles are famous for. And then the second transition, the Beatles didn't stop after Help. In 1968, they released the animated movie Yellow Submarine. Now the key to making these work is after you state your transition, you just move right into your subpoint A. So you don't repeat the main point. It just sounds redundant. So I would say, so A Hard Day's Night launched their movie career, but the movie Help is another movie that the Beatles are famous for. Then I would move into fact A. And I would say, Help was released in whatever year it was released in. So don't state your main points. It's taken care of really in your transition. Let's take a look at some examples from student speeches. So I had a student who wanted to give a speech on 3 ways to reduce stress. And her main points were eat healthy, work out, and meditate. Now you might look at those and think they're fine, but really they're way too broad, and let's be honest, all of us know this. So some of my students will say things like, it's kind of boring, and I would agree it's kind of boring. So I told her, be specific, give us a specific thing to do, and we will be more likely to remember it and engage with the content and be interested. So she ended up talking about number 1, eat dark chocolate, number 2, take the stairs, and number 3, use lavender. That's a much better speech for the audience. It's unusual, and they're probably things that we may never have heard about. And here's another one. I had a student who wanted to give a speech on 3 dangerous animals, and I'm like, well, yeah, they eat us, so like they're just like a lion, and tiger, and a bear, and there's nothing different about them except they're just different animals. So I challenged him and said, come up with a different approach. And what he ended up focusing on was the most dangerous animal in the air, the most dangerous animal on land, and the most dangerous animal in the water. And then they're very different, and how they kill would be very different. So that's a much more interesting speech. Secondly, I had a student who wanted to give a speech on 3 of the biggest malls in the world. And the only thing that was different about them is their size. So that's like a 1 and 30-second speech. And so again, I challenged the student to come up with something more unusual, and what this person ended up focusing on were 3 malls with unique features. And she talked about a mall that had an amusement park, a mall that had a ski resort, and a mall that had an indoor beach. Again, much more interesting for the audience than just listening to a bunch of numbers about big malls. On occasion, I have students who give a speech where the keyword is either differences or similarities. And if that's the case, here's how you need to organize your speech. It is very specific. So what you're going to do is In this example, I have students who give speeches on the difference between an NCAA sport and a professional sport. So the first difference is the length of the game. And by the way, I'm totally making this up because I have no idea. So the first difference is the length of the game. And then the first subpoint is the NCAA, and then you explain that. And then the second main point is the professional team, and then you explain that. Be really careful. What happens is a lot of students go back and forth, and then it just gets really confusing. So you talk about one, and then you talk about the other. So if you haven't figured this out, organization is not really all that difficult. It just takes a lot of time and the messiness of writing and rewriting. So remember, parallel structure, simplicity, and make it audience-centered and simple for us to understand and follow. So things should make a lot more sense now, but if you have any questions, feel free to stop by my office during office hours or send me an email and we can schedule an appointment. Good luck, and I'll see you in class.